Hello, and a warm welcome to the first episode of the August BV podcast, your insight into the delights and sights of our lovely county of Dorset. I'm Jenny Devitt.
And hello from me, Terry Bennett.
In this episode, we'll be hearing from our politicians.
Simon Hoare reflects on the recent general election and the very different complexion of politics in the second half of 2024.
Ken Huggins of the North Dorset Green Party says there's a green surge, with 2 million votes at the last election and growing. And Gary Jackson of the North Dorset LibDems tells us that the further education sector is in crisis, being ignored and underfunded. And Guy Perkins of the North Dorset Labour Party says that expertise and experience is at the helm of the new government.
I speak with James Cox, organiser of the Dorset County Show, and learn a little about what's new in the forthcoming 2024 event.
The Dorset charity Mosaic has launched an appeal for donations so they can continue to offer vital counselling and support for children and young people trying to cope with the death of a loved one. Mosaic CEO Joe Revel tells us about the charity. We start this first episode, as ever, by hearing from our editor, Laura Hitchcock.
July was quite the month. Hot on the heels of a big birthday for me, we celebrated our 32nd wedding anniversary. Yes, I know, I don't look old enough, what can I say? And then just a few days after we published July's issue, we booked some flights and were in Marseille by Tuesday lunchtime. I say that so casually, but this was the first time we've flown in 23 years. This was a very big, small flight for us. When our oldest was a toddler, we left him with the grandparents and took off for a post-uni celebratory week in Portugal. And for no good reason whatsoever, seasoned traveller Courtney panicked on the flight. The return trip was no better, and an irrational fear of flying set in. We should have got straight back on a plane, of course, but instead we opted to have 2 more babies and consequently very little money or energy for foreign holidays. By the time our daughter, number 4, came along, we were very used to the car, boat, train options dictating our travel. But now, number 1 son lives 4,000 miles away, and we're off to visit him. And Courtney decided his first flight could not be a 14-hour one, just in case. So to Marseille we went. And it was a beautifully dull, boring flight with zero drama. Perfect. Of course, we returned to the UK refreshed and relaxed, only to pick up COVID. I got swiftly better, Courtney got worse. And worse. And the last couple of weeks have been an exhausting tumble of attempting to stay on top of things and desperately trying to remember how relaxed we were just a couple of weeks ago in the middle of a French vineyard. Everybody knows we're a team. Being man down on our 48th publication week, 4 years. We can't believe it. I'll admit the wheels came off. Suddenly, the team wasn't teaming. It may be publication week, but I've had to do laundry, I've had to clean the kitchen, feed everybody, make my own lunch, remember whether it's paracetamol or ibuprofen next. This is not the service I have come to expect. It culminated with a very long day and evening in A&E. Luckily, he's slowly improving now. But I have warned him he's never to be ill in publication week again. It just won't do. I've missed him.
Survivor's guilt and political resolve, navigating politics with humility. MP Simon Hoare reflects on the election aftermath, his duty to North Dorset, and promises constructive opposition. Well, quite a lot has happened since the last edition of this fantastic magazine. As the June and July editions were during the election campaign, the editor, in her infinite wisdom, pulled the usual political columns. Thankfully, normal service has now resumed. My first and very pleasant duty is to thank the electors of North Dorset for re-electing me to continue my public service on their behalf. It was always going to be a difficult and challenging election, and so it proved. Perhaps more so than I had anticipated when I look across our depleted benches in the Commons. I must confess, and I know I'm not alone, that I have felt survivor's guilt. It was doubtless the same at Rorke's Drift or in the Crimea following the charge of the Light Brigade. It's a side to the craft of politics that is not necessarily talked about. Politics is a human business and very much a family team effort. So are lots of jobs, I know, but sometimes the personal side of politics is not recognised. To win is an emotional experience, to lose even more so. I saw some fallen colleagues visibly controlling their emotions as they emptied their offices after years, sometimes decades, of serving their communities. While our politics is brutal, think Gladiator but with order papers, it's also civilised here in the UK. We smile and shake hands with the victor and the vanquished. Everyone did in North Dorset, save one, who may remain nameless, and then we promptly get on with the job. We should be proud that election results in this country are not met with Trumpian revolt or states of emergency being declared. A removal van turns up and shortly afterwards the new tenant arrives. The timeless monarch provides the constitutional link between old and new. During the last Parliament, I saw several she must be embarrassed to put Conservative on their Twitter or Facebook pages. I never have used the label on my own social media, but it's not out of embarrassment. Let me explain why. When I am a candidate, I put on party colours, a blue rosette. I stand as a Conservative and badge myself accordingly. Having been elected, however, I serve as the Member of Parliament. I am, of course, a Conservative. I take, and sometimes abide by, the Conservative whip in the House of Commons. But, and it's a big but, as the MP, I serve all of North Dorset, whether they voted for me or for somebody else, or did not vote at all. If they have a problem, then they need to come and see me as their MP, not a Conservative. I'm here to serve all the communities that make up North Dorset, and will always be as inclusive and welcoming as possible to one and all. We are fortunate to live in a fantastic country. Not one without problems and challenges, we all know that. Stuff needs doing here at home, and the whole world seems less safe and sure than we would like it to be. I want to wish the new government well. They serve us all, and we have to hope that good fortune shines on them. When it does, we all benefit. I've been asked a number of times how I would conduct myself in opposition. Let me try to answer that question. I will speak up and stand up for North Dorset, as I always have, without fear or favour. I shall badger and berate on behalf of my constituents. Indeed, I've declined a shadow ministerial role to allow me to do so. I shall oppose the government where I truly believe they're getting it wrong, but I won't oppose for opposition's sake. I will endeavour, as I believe my party will, to be constructive. There are lots of issues which will benefit from cross-party working. I'm pledged to play my part in that approach, and I know that's what you will want me to do.
2 million votes and growing, writes Ken Huggins of the North Dorset Green Party. When it was finally over, the media smoke billowing off the election battlefield somewhat obscured the fact that as well as winning all 4 of its target seats, the Green Party came second in another 39 constituencies. Growing numbers of us are obviously grasping the severity of the unfolding environmental situation. Around 2 million people voted for the Green Party and its vision for a better future, and more than 3,000 new members have joined since the election ended. No doubt many more would have voted Green had it not been for widespread tactical voting, on which point, as well as being grateful for those people who contacted me before the election to express their support, I appreciated the messages of those who apologetically let me know that they were reluctantly going to vote tactically this time round. Shame it didn't pay off in North Dorset. Close, but no coconut. If we're to enjoy a true democracy, then we need to change the way we elect our politicians. Yet again, the first-past-the-post electoral system has given us a government that only received a minority of the vote. This time it was Labour who benefited, their 34% vote share gaining them 63% of the seats in Parliament. The Conservatives' 24% vote share gave them 19% of the seats, while the other party's 42% share of the vote gave them just 18% of the seats. Little wonder the Electoral Reform Society has called the result the most disproportional on record. At the hustings events leading up to the election, there was a noticeable lack of questions about the environment. For far too long now, many politicians and most of the media have either denied or downplayed the severity of the ever-worsening environmental situation. The unexpectedly rapid onset of the changing climate that we're now experiencing is a massive wake-up call. We have to halt both the destruction of the natural world and global warming. Not next year, not next decade, now. Time is no longer on our side. The future can still be bright, but only if we work to make it so. And now we hear from Gary Jackson of the North Dorset Liberal Democrats.
Grow further education for economic growth. One of the things that really energised me as a candidate during the general election campaign was education. But it received scant wider debate. VAT on private education grabbed attention, and financial stresses in higher education and teachers' pay made headlines. But there was little discussion of education overall. Exam results will be out this month, and we will all celebrate. No doubt we will also have the ritual fuss about examination regimes, and Labour will talk about its planned review of the curriculum and assessment. The real scandal, though, is in how we fail 16 to 21-year-olds in further education and training. The issue has real relevance to us here in North Dorset. Kingston Moorwood College, near Dorchester, merged with Weymouth College on the 1st of August as part of the Dorset Colleges group of further education establishments. Kingston Moorwood faced acute financial pressures and might have closed. And the merger is an important move, and it's a strategic one for the FE sector overall. The college is important for our rural economy here in North Dorset as a centre of excellence and closest regional provider of agricultural and horticultural courses. A merger of two universities in the troubled higher education sector might command national media attention, but not this merger of colleges in the equally troubled FE sector. Yes, there's a difference in scale, but I'm drawing attention to an ingrained and unjust indifference to further education. The FE sector has been underfunded and undervalued for years, but more recently has been under acute financial pressure. A drive to give parity of esteem to vocational and academic qualifications led to the T-Levels initiative of the previous Conservative government, and then T-Levels were dumped in the dying days of that wretched administration for lack of money and direction. Successive governments talk the talk on apprenticeships and further education, but they do not walk the walk. We have a desperate need for a more skilled and motivated workforce, and the most obvious route to it is to provide attractive and well-funded education and training to young people. We're simply not doing enough of it. Department for Education statistics for apprenticeships for under-19s show a 40% reduction from 2010 to 2023, and at least 50,000 fewer, with the greatest reduction from 2016. Labour says it will set up Skills England, make some changes to the apprenticeship levy, and says it will turn FE colleges into specialist technical excellence colleges. But what progress will we see in 5 years' time? The path to growth in our economy is through investment in people and capital. The new government needs to demonstrate that it values further education and training for young people and stops paying them lip service. Businesses invest where there are skilled people, and people are in turn attracted to where there are good jobs. We need a virtuous circle like this in North Dorset if we're to thrive, which needs strong FE and HE colleges nearby. I send best wishes for the future to staff and students at Kingston Moorwood College and our FE colleges across Dorset. We need and value what they do.
Hi everyone, my name's Guy, and this is my first article for the Blackmore Vale magazine. So let me just speak about it. So I was at the North Dorset election count in Blandford that night of the 4th of July, and we were all there until about 5:30 a.m. in the morning. And as I left, I said congratulations to the re-elected Conservative MP Simon Hoare, whom I do have a lot of respect for. And I look forward to his next term representing North Dorset. And I said to his colleague, sort of jokingly, make sure you keep your party from steering into the Vale of the far right extreme, to which he jokingly replied, and you keep Labour sensible too. And I thought it was a bit funny because, I have basically zero influence on the Labour Party. So really my article is all about if you're worried or skeptical about this new Labour government, then this article is really directed at you. And I want to really start by focusing your attention on the very simple and very deliberate act of the cabinet appointments over the first weekend of the Labour government. Because for me, I felt a lot of relief that we have seemingly returned to a government with a leader making very smart ministerial appointments, which makes sense because in each position there's relevant life experience and expertise. And I think for a long time, British politics has really been crying out for this. So I'm just going to run through them for you. So starting with the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, he was the former Director of Public Prosecutions, someone with experience of management and leading, someone capable of making hard decisions for the greater good. Next, we have the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves, someone whose entire political ambition has been to become Chancellor, which I heard her speak on a podcast I listened to, and someone who's actually worked for the actual Bank of England and understands the economy. And then we have the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, and she's someone, she didn't attend private school or go to university, and she's had a lot of difficult life experiences. So she left school at 16 whilst expecting a baby, and even through these challenging conditions, she's risen through adversity and now sits as Deputy Prime Minister, which is incredible. And then we have the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper. She has various political experiences in the past, so former chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, and she even worked for Bill Clinton before his election victory in 1992, and she served past cabinet positions in the Gordon Brown government. And then we have the Minister for Women and Qualities, Bridget Phillipson. So before becoming an MP, she actually managed a refuge for women and children fleeing domestic violence. So again, a real relevant, positive experience for the role. Then we have the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy. So he led the campaign for the Windrush British citizens to be granted full British citizenship. And he has also been at the forefront of the fight for justice for the families affected by the absolute awful, tragic Grenfell fire events which took place a few years ago now. Then we have a very interesting appointment, which is the Minister for Prisons, James Timpson. So he was awarded an OBE for services to the training and employment for disadvantaged people, and is also known for advocating for the employment of former prisoners through his family company, Timpsons. So again, an expert about rehabilitation and the management of prisoners and how we get them back into to society. I don't know, the Science Minister, you might have heard of him, Patrick Vallance. He's a clinical scientist and pharmacologist, past president of research and development at GSK, and former chief scientific advisor to the government, and you probably remember him from the COVID years. And then we have the Secretary for Energy, Security and Net Zero, Ed Miliband, who's really, really passionate about the environment and about climate change. He oversaw the introduction of the Climate Change Act 2008, and is the co-chair to the Institute for Public Policy Research Environmental Justice Commission. Then we have the Rail Minister, Hendy of Richmond Hill, and he is the chairman of Network Rail. So again, that just makes total sense. Then we have the Attorney General, Richard Hermer, who's a serious international lawyer, and he's worked in many cases, including the Afghan unlawful killings inquiry and the Task Force on Accountability for Crimes Committed in Ukraine. So yeah, I hope after listening to me speak and reading my article that I've moved your needle slightly to feel some relief and confidence in this new Labour government. And although this is just the start, hopefully the foundations have been laid for a successful and meaningful government to address the many issues that we face in this country and to try and enact positive change that we really need. So yeah, thank you very much.
And that was Guy Perkins of the North Dorset Labour Party.
James Cox is the show organiser for the Dorset County Show, which takes place during early September. I took the opportunity of catching up with James to find out a little bit more about what we can expect from this year's show. James, thank you for joining us on the BV podcast. And you're described as the show organiser for the Dorset County Show. That sounds like a pretty wide job description. Just tell us a little bit about what you do.
I'm the one that's in the office all year round, and we pull together a show. So we work with committees, volunteers, attractions all year round, contractors, and then somehow it all comes together and we bring it together on the 7th and 8th of September for the county show.
And tell us a little bit also about the history of the Dorset County Show. It's been going a fair number of years, hasn't it?
Yes, over 170 years it's been celebrating rural life in Dorset. It's got a lot of history to it, and that's what we do. We kind of celebrate traditions of the countryside and the livestock and everything we've done in the countryside for years, and also look at the modern machinery. So you've got everything from the heavy horses when agriculture first begun to the big, massive machines that currently work the land.
And it's a traditional county show, as people may know them. They crop up all over the place, don't they? You've got the Devon County Show, and you've got the Mid-Devon Show, I think, and the Bath and West, and many others besides. And it follows the same kind of tradition, I guess. Do you know what the history of these things actually is, how they came about? An opportunity for farmers, I suppose, to get together and show off their livestock initially.
Back in the days of bowler hats, I think that was when, I think there were farmers' clubs back then, and they kind of want to get together and give the best award to the prize animal and kind of celebrate things. I guess they've all expanded massively over time, haven't they? A bit like the Olympics, but for livestock and horses.
Well, that's very topical at the moment, isn't it? So,
exactly.
Just looking at what your job entails, as you say, many, many facets of getting the show together, I would imagine that starts almost as soon as one show is over, you start planning for the next, don't you?
Yeah, even now we're looking at next year's show already, and we're 3 weeks out to this year's county show, and already looking at what we do next year, what we do layout-wise, traction-wise, and you're always thinking about back of your head, what we can do next year. And even at this point, when everything's booked and somewhat ready, you're always thinking next year ahead, of course. The minute the gates close, it's all full steam ahead to next year with post-show meetings. And while we have that lull over winter, it's kind of from the beginning, the minute those gates shut, you kind of let out a big sigh of relief. And it's also thinking, got to do this again next year.
We're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. Tell us about this year, first of all. What's different about previous years for those that may have been before? What can they expect this year that they may not have seen previously?
So post-COVID, we kind of reinvented the show, and this year we've got some big new attractions joining us. We've got Atkinson's Action Horses for their first ever kind of display in Dorset, and this is the most stunning display of elegance and horsemanship. 5 horses and this rider who do some incredible stunts and incredible skills with the horses. We got the Imps Motorcycle Display Team, and they are kind of roaring into the main ring twice daily with motorbikes, fire, everything you want to hear, frills, everything. And also we've got some brand new areas. We've got a brand new alpaca section. So you can meet 50 alpacas, which will be judged over the show weekend. And we've also got a brand new fun dog show. And on top of that, we introduced some new areas last year. So we've expanded our woodland area and expanded our food and drink area as well. So yeah, lots going on this year.
The fun dog show rather intrigues me, looking at some of the categories that listed in the article. Something like biscuit catching competition or something like that. Was that right?
Fluffiest dog as well. And then I think there's some nice ones like the best rescue, and I think like the waggiest tail. So
Sorry, this is a competition that anybody can enter, can they? They just bring their dog along on the day.
Literally anyone can enter, yeah. So if your dog is like mine and does not sit still for very long, there's still probably an option to win something.
That sounds like good fun. And in terms of the practicalities for people who may not have been previously, you're just outside Dorchester, aren't you? What's the best way to get there?
So if you follow the postcode DT27SD, there is road signs from very far outside of the county show area. So you follow the yellow directional signs and they'll take you to closest car park. And we've introduced extra car parks this year to help speed up entry. And we've also got shuttle buses for those that are based near the show as well.
Disabled access?
Follow the blue parking signs.
And disabled people in a wheelchair, for example, would be able to get around the site okay, will they?
Yes, there's a lot of greenfield sites. Of course, can be weather dependent. But yes, we hire out mobility scooters as well. So yes, we welcome all accessibilities.
And I imagine that, as in previous years, you will have a wide array of food and drink and those sorts of temptations for people who may wish to go and indulge in some fancy cakes and jams and honey and all the rest of it.
The highlight of the show. Well, we call our food hall Dorset's largest larder. So you've got around 50 to 60 stands in there. A big array of everything you want to eat, from donuts to cheese and, of course, gin. Who doesn't go to a show and not try gin? So yeah, all the variety of foods and drinks. And then outside the food hall, we've got the food and drink area, which you can get hot food, sit down, enjoy it, underneath the festival flags to music. So yeah, food and drink, it's like the pinnacle of the show.
And going back to the origins of the show, I presume that agriculture is still a very major underpinning theme of the Dorset County Show, and thereby there will be plenty of competitions for livestock and sheep and pigs and all the rest of it, I suppose.
Absolutely. Competitions from cattle, sheep, pigs, goats, sheep shearing, alpacas, to all the different horse sections as well. It's all about showcasing agriculture, countryside and rural life in Dorset. And then, of course, the agricultural sector being the end of harvest celebration. So there's that networking element with the business-to-business sales and also meeting fellow farmers after a very long, kind of busy summer period, which, of course, has probably been very trying with the weather this year. So it's kind of bringing all those elements of agriculture together and celebrating it for every demographic in Dorset.
Wonderful. So it's Saturday the 7th and Sunday the 8th of September. And you would presumably encourage people to come along for a great day out, a family day out.
Absolutely, yeah. So 7th, 8th September, and tickets are on sale now at dorsetcounty.co.uk.
Or I presume people can come and buy tickets at the gate as well, can they?
Advanced discounts end on the 31st of August, and then you can buy on the gate as well. And children go free.
James Cox, the organiser of the Dorset County Show, and you can find out everything you need to know about this year's show at dorsetcountyshow.co.uk.
Back in 2007, a small charity called Mosaic was set up in Dorset with the aim of helping children cope with the death of someone close or important to them. It was set up by Margaret Hannibal, who realised that there was a gap in the provision of support and help for young people. A family or a teacher or a carer may get in touch with the charity to tell them of a child who's not coping with the grief and the loss, and can they please help? Joe Revel, CEO of Mosaic, explained what practical support the charity offers.
So we give phone support to families and other relatives, where we advise on how they might be able to talk to the person, but we then look at whether it might be suitable for a referral to one of our counsellors. Now, our counsellors, all 29 of them, are qualified counsellors and therapists who are freelance, if you like. They're paid on a sessional basis. And so all of our fundraising is really geared towards providing the funds so that counsellors can go in, meet that child or young person, and enable them to have someone who listens to them, who understands them, and who can set them on the path to being able to deal more with those emotions and to develop some resilience, if you like, and ways of coping with what they're dealing with.
And Joe, I'm just wondering what signs the teacher or someone else picks up on from the child which prompts them to ask for your help.
Sometimes it's a change that can come about in their attitude to school or to their friendship groups. It can be not talking. It can come through as sometimes not attending school, Jenny. It may be that they are struggling to come into school each day. It could be that their work slips and the engagement and the work that they were putting into schoolwork starts to go downhill. They could see them perhaps behaving differently in class or with their friendship groups, or perhaps not talking very much. So there's a whole range of signs where a teacher might think that, this student is not is really struggling to understand and deal with the emotions they're experiencing.
I'm wondering if the child perhaps finds it very difficult to talk about such a sad and painful subject, and so maybe shut in on themselves?
Well, I think each young person is different, so there's no kind of one model for everybody. I think each family is different. So in some families there will be, following a death, there'll be a fairly open and honest conversation about the death, about the impact of that death, about what that means for the whole family, about perhaps why the person died, and also about creating good memories follow their death. That doesn't happen in every family or for every carer. So I think it really, really differs from person to person, and the child's response will differ as well.
So it could be said that many people don't necessarily think that it's the children who might need more help or counselling after the death of someone they love, do they?
Well, it may well be. You know, just under half of all the cases who are referred to us do involve the death of a parent. So very often you're right. The fact is that the adults will need or may need some kind of support, and they may get that support, they may not. But certainly we were set up to ensure that the children or young people can also access that support. And actually in doing that, we work with the whole family. You know, we talk to the parents, we liaise with the school. You know, if we see specific needs, we'll talk to the teachers, we'll talk to the people in school who need to know about it. If it's a really complex case, we would, if we needed to, refer to the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services in Dorset for that extra level of support that you might need. But certainly, I mean, it doesn't take away from the help that the adults in the family might need.
So by helping the children, you could be helping the adults too.
Well, we hope so. And in fact, we do, because we can offer advice and support to parents. You know, they can flag up if they think they have particular worries. We will work with them. So really, what you want is there to be a whole network of support around the young person to enable them, if you like, to sort of find a way of getting back on track and sometimes making sense of what's happened.
It could be said, I suppose, Jo, that it should be the role of the surviving parent to help their children through the loss of either their father or their mother.
Yes, and obviously the parent who has survived does do that. I mean, you know, if you talk to anyone who's been in that situation, I mean, you know, the whole world has changed, and they will give immense support to the people around them. It doesn't mean that they don't themselves need help or that their children don't need help in that situation, because it can be very good for a young person to have someone who's a qualified counsellor to listen to how they're feeling, actually, to understand it and to help make sense of it.
Someone outside the family.
Yes.
Not related to them. Now, you've seen a significant rise in the numbers of children being referred to Mosaic for help and counselling. Why is that?
We don't exactly know all the factors behind the rise. We think that coming out of COVID, what you've seen generally is a rise in anxiety levels amongst young people. I think that's been well charted. We have seen pressures around the cost of living. And of course, one in 6 children in Dorset live in relative poverty. So there are really big issues related to living costs for families. And when families are under that kind of pressure and they're just trying to cope and manage, if there's then a death in the family or the death of a friend, it can be enormously difficult for them to talk about and cope with. It could also be, Jenny, that Mosaic's work, which has involved engaging communities across the county, is just better known now than it was. So people feel more able to come to us for help, and that the rise, which has been considerable, is partly because people know they can pick up the phone and obtain that kind of level of support. I think it's a whole number of factors. It's not that there is a higher death rate in Dorset in the last couple of years. That seems to be fairly steady.
So it is partly the fact that people increasingly know about you, and that pushes the numbers up.
It could be that. It could also be that some families are really struggling to cope with, just getting by, just living in general. And then that just can make it much harder then when there's a death to talk about it and deal with it and have the space within the family to have those conversations that need to happen.
I'm sure, Jo, you must run into cases where it's the children who are giving the emotional support to the surviving parent.
Yes, that's right. I mean, very often, there will be children and young people who absolutely do that. And as I said, it just differs from person to person. But having a counsellor that you can talk to in a safe space for that 1 hour can make a really big difference in helping them then feel supported and giving advice about how to manage it.
Now, I see that as part of your programme you run residential courses, and I imagine that close friendships and bonds are formed between a number of the children who go on those courses.
They are. We ran a course in May and it was fantastic. The young people, all of whom had been through counselling with us, were able to come away for a weekend in the Purbecks, which was wonderful. And they do form really close bonds. But what we also run, Jenny, are activity days so that those who've benefited from counselling can come along to, say, Corfe Castle or elsewhere, or a sailing activity day, and meet their peer group. And they do form very close bonds, which can last over many, many years. And also for the parents as well. They meet other parents in that situation. It's an intangible thing, but it's a really big benefit.
And of course, one of the great things about having activities like that must be that it draws the children out of themselves.
Yes, it will. I mean, because as we all know, well-being is partly about doing things, isn't it? It's about getting out. It's about enjoying Dorset, enjoying the countryside and the space that Dorset has to offer, and being with other children or being with young people. It's so important that they have time for that, and they can perhaps move away from the laptops or the phones for a while and actually be doing artwork or doing sailing or the other activities that we're able to offer.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Jo, because in these times when social media and mobile phones really seem to govern and control people's lives, particularly young people's, and there's increasing talk of many youngsters not being able to communicate on a personal face-to-face basis. So could that be part of the reason why you're seeing an increase in the numbers needing Mosaic's help?
I don't think we've got any evidence for that at all. I think it's quite interesting. I mean, the other thing I think I'm aware of is there's a big digital divide, isn't there? Even in Dorset, because a lot of families actually can't afford to buy all the data packages that a family might want in order to be able to go online, because it's actually quite expensive for families to have that. So I think it really varies again. I think, in terms of the increase, it would be hard to say that is down to phones or social media. I think we wouldn't have evidence. We wouldn't have evidence for that. And of course, a lot of young people, their friendship groups are now very tied to their social media support. I think when you talk about, because communications and how you communicate about death is extremely important, and probably as a society, we're not incredibly mature in approaching it. I think a lot of times what happens actually is that someone dies and people try to protect the child or the young person by not wanting them to feel more sad, and therefore thinking, well, I won't mention it. We'll talk about other things. I'll distract them. We'll do something else. When actually the kind of thing might be to ask them how they're doing and how they're feeling, and not shying away from that conversation. So I think communications works both ways, actually.
And you don't want to bottle up those feelings, do you? Now, you're running this appeal at Mosaic, and this is a time when a lot of people are struggling financially, a situation that's sadly not likely to get any better. And of course, we all look to see where we can make savings, and that's when the finances of charities such as yours suffer, don't they?
They do. It's a really challenging time, I think, for anybody actually in the charity sector at the moment, because you have lots of. We're lucky in many ways, aren't we, in the UK, because we have many charities, and we have communities that are very generous in how they give. But clearly, when, we're facing very high energy bills and other areas, it's difficult for families to perhaps give as much as they used to, difficult for companies to do that as well. We've always been really lucky in Dorset, I think, because we've had great levels of support from both individuals and community groups. We have people who swim the channel for us, or run a concert in their local church, or do amazing walks from Dorchester to Portland and back, as the Rotarians have just done. So we have a lot of support, but the truth is that the costs are going up because the need is going up. So for us, it's how we carry on being able to offer counselling to so many children, actually without having to bring in a waiting list or without having to effectively ration that care, Jenny.
You might seem to be caught in a bit of a vicious circle, are you?
Well, I feel it's one that we can resolve with the right thinking. So we've been very, very careful about our own costs, our internal costs and office costs, and we've brought those right down. And we're thinking innovatively about different forms of support that we can offer. So, for example, one thing we do now is we offer bereavement cafes, which happen at the end of school in certain towns in Dorset across the month. And in that way, the children whom the teachers know have recently lost somebody can be invited in at the end of the day, and they can come in, meet a counsellor, meet our volunteers, and do some artwork and talk, if they want to talk, about the death of someone important to them. We have a memory tree, so they create good memories of that person, and really that's a kind of peer support that we can offer those students. And we think it really helps support the teachers in that school so that they can see there is something there for those pupils. And we can also see if there are children who are really struggling at that point to offer them extra help. And ours was a fairly recent innovation. It's really only got going in the last year. And they are popular, and the young people who come to them are amazing. And they can talk about anything or everything there. It's really up to them.
Thank you so much, Jo, for talking to us for the BV podcast. That was Jo Revel, who's CEO of the Dorset charity Mosaic. And if you'd like to donate, have a look online on www.mosaicfamilysupport.org. And I know every single donation will be very welcome. And with that, we come to the end of this first August 2024 episode of the BV podcast. We hope you found it interesting and entertaining, and that you'll join us again in a couple of weeks' time for episode 2. Until then, it's bye-bye from me, Jenny Devitt.
And it's goodbye from me, Terry Bennett.